Please be aware that tonight's Board of Supervisors meeting is being video recorded. First up on the agenda is receipt of the minutes for October the 12th and October the 18th. Are there any questions from the supervisors? Take that as a no. Can I have a motion?
So moved.
Have a second.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Second up is the receipt of the invoice history for September 2021. Are there any questions from the board? Take that as a no. Can I have a motion?
So moved.
A second? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thanks, Chuck, for coming in and doing those. Appreciate it. Next up is authorization for the draft 2022 budget and fiscal plan. So just so you know, we've had a budget workshop. Our township manager over there does an excellent job every year. Every year the binder gets bigger. I think it was like between 4 and 5 inches this time. Of course, we get an electronic copy if we wish. And we go through the budget meetings and we ask them questions. And so what this is all about is we're required to advertise it. So it's a draft and it's a plan. And you can examine it at the township offices, our office. So is there any questions from the supervisors?
No.
Are there any questions from members of the audience? I believe you, Craig.
It will be tomorrow, Mark. It'll be on the website tomorrow.
Okay. Can I have a motion?
So moved. I have a
Second.
question.
Oh, please go ahead.
So after the authorization to advertise, at what point do we then vote on the final budget? Is that in January?
That's in December, isn't it, Craig?
Yes, it has to be approved by the end of the
Yeah.
year, December 31st.
Okay.
So we're hoping for December 14th, so we don't have to have a special meeting, but December 14th, it'll be on the agenda for hopefully an approval or discussion.
And so up until that point, we can get input from the community if there are any questions?
Yes, any questions or any emails they want to send or anything that the board wants to send can send to me or any of the department heads.
Okay, thank you. All right, I'm ready to vote.
Okay. Did I get a second out of that? I got a motion. Did you give me the second? Trustee?
Second.
You did. Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Next up is authorization to advertise a request for proposal for auditing services. It's a 3-year contract. All right, Craig, could you explain why we go out every 3 years or so for auditor, please?
Well, like anything else, we would go out for requests for proposals for one, pricing, and secondly, so we don't keep with the same firm over and over again that keeps looking at the same things over again. So the firm we had is Barbicane Thornton. They actually won the last 2, so they've been here for 6 years. So we're going to go out for proposals for a new auditor, new auditing service. So they come in and look at our books every year. So usually it's a 3-year term. So.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions from members of the board? And just so we're clear, these are CPAs, they're public auditing firm, right? So these aren't, Joe's accounting. So, okay. Are there any questions from members of the audience? Okay, can I have a motion? Can I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Next up is resolution 2021 dash, we don't have a dash number. Findings of facts, conclusions, and decisions by the Board of Supervisors and conditional use application for the Cedar Hill Development Group. Cedar Hill is present. So could you introduce yourself, please?
Good evening. My name is Ed Hughes. I represent the applicant.
Excuse me, Craig, can you give him a microphone?
Ed Hughes, I represent the applicant.
Thank you, Ed.
I did receive a copy of the draft and it's acceptable to my client as drafted.
Mhm. And I think there was some open issues there. and one of them was on open space. So there was a question about contiguous open space. That's come up in a couple of our meetings. I believe we asked you to look at it, your organization, and from an engineering point of view. Jim, did I get that right? That was one of the questions we had was on open space, contiguous. And we also had a question about, we wanted to make sure about the stormwater. The stormwater management, there's an issue down there, and we wanted to make sure that the open space in the stormwater management were handled in such a way to help the folks in Wooded Pond. Can you address any of those?
Well, the stormwater management will be reviewed in detail during the subdivision and land development portion of the project if we go forward with conditional use approval. My understanding is that to try to make more contiguous open space would jeopardize the stormwater management proposal we have now. And I think we've done the best we can with regard to making the open space contiguous, at the same time addressing the major concern about stormwater runoff to the rear of the property.
Okay, thank you.
I think the last issues, Mr. Chairman, I think were around protecting or ensuring that open space basin is going to be covered. And the bus stops. I think those are the last couple issues that we have.
Yeah, so, the open space, I don't know that we got the answer to that. I think we did. So how the detention basin was going to be, if it was going to be protected with a fence. Is that in fact the case?
Part of the order.
I believe it's covered in the resolution as a condition of approval that we protect that basin to the extent determined by the township engineer during the review process.
Okay.
So if a fence is required or some other amenity, we would agree to do that.
Okay.
And
so-
we did agree during the subdivision land development process to install a bus stop area along the frontage in a place to be determined with review by the township engineer. That's another condition.
Okay. Danielle, did you have another question?
Yep.
Okay. Are there any questions from members of the board?
I have a question. I think something that might have been overlooked and I still think is a good idea. Your client agreed to an arborist report in the January Planning Commission meeting, which I think is a good idea in terms of really honing in on the tree replacement requirement. There was some discussion about diseased and dead trees, et cetera. I think a inventory would be a good exercise to do. Would he still be amenable to that?
Yes.
Thank you.
Ed, if I may, since we go back years, I missed your answer to the detention basin about fencing and so forth. It was my fault. I was tending to something else. Could you repeat that answer, please, for me?
Well, condition number 9 of the draft resolution says, if directed by the township engineer, the applicant shall install protective fencing around the stormwater management basin.
Okay, thank you.
That condition is acceptable.
Okay.
Okay. Are there any more questions from the board of supervisors?
No.
Are there any questions for the members of the audience?
We do have a hand raised.
Okay, please go ahead.
Hi, this is Deborah Schaefer at 823 Penland Pike. If I recall correctly, there was another question about parking that had not actually been addressed beyond parking in the driveways. Has that been addressed at all to create any sort of street parking?
Not at this time. I think that'll come up during the subdivision land development process as to whether we would.
Deborah, did you hear the answer?
No, I did not. I'm sorry.
Speak up, please. Thank you.
The ability to park in the drives will come up during the subdivision and land development portion of the process. Right now, it's not addressed at this point, other than on-lot parking for each house.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any more questions from the audience? Either way, online?
I have a question. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Oh, great.
please
you.
introduce yourself.
Yes, my name's David Smeltzer, and I live below the proposed development area in Wooded Pond. And at the last meeting, there seemed to be a great concern about there being too many houses on this property. We heard it from several of the people at the meeting. I believe at least one or more of the supervisors had that concern. And I'm wondering if that's still a concern and what the supervisors think of that.
I'm going to defer that to the engineer because that came up before. Was it an appropriate number of houses there? And I believe the answer to that was yes. There's an acceptable amount of housing. In other words, if the developer was to change, I believe it was the open space to make it more contiguous, they would then start losing lots. But if we did that, we could also impact the stormwater. And as I recall, the engineer, Mr. Hirsch, maybe you can correct me, if they changed the engineering to correct the stormwater, it wouldn't be as efficient as to where it is that they would have it now, because right now it's at the lower end of the development. I believe that was the answer.
Yeah, that's a correct statement. The open space is situated such that it would allow them to provide the best stormwater benefit. And that is their case that they've made as to why the open space is located where it is.
Are you comfortable with that answer?
I think
From an
that
engineering point of view?
from the engineering point of view, the open space is located where the stormwater management facilities would want to be based on the slope of the land.
Thank you.
So just to clarify, Mr. Hirsch, so his question is about the reduction in lot sizes. So if we reduce the lot sizes and kind of make the open space more contiguous, we don't get the same stormwater benefit. Is that accurate or no?
The layout as presented meets the criteria for the cluster development. Their case is that the open space also meets that criteria. That's for the board to decide. As far as like other development options that aren't cluster, we haven't seen a plan or reviewed a plan or done any sketches to really know what the yield would be.
Could you explain what a cluster development is for the benefit of everybody in this meeting?
Cluster development in your ordinance allows for reduced lot sizes, provided that the applicant meets certain criteria. One of those criteria is dedicating a certain amount of open space.
Okay, so does everybody understand what he's saying? Because if you don't cluster, you reduce the amount of open space that's available. Is that basically, I restated as it basically
Yeah.
correct? Yeah.
That's correct.
So the idea is to keep the relationship to open space to housing on a lot, so there's more open space. But the houses are then closer together, isn't that correct, Jim? That's the cluster
By
concept.
by dedicating the open space and leaving that open, they are afforded by the ordinance reduced lot sizes and therefore a few extra houses than the other development options in the ordinance. But those other development options in the ordinance don't get you the open space. So that's the trade-off.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Zeltzer, David, does that answer your question?
Well, I understand what's been said, but from my perspective, and I believe others from the last meeting as well, feel that there are too many lots too many homes on that property, given the way it's laid out. And I hope that the runoff story that we got last time is accurate and that they will be able to manage the water to the extent of improving the water, diminishing the water that runs through our neighborhood.
And you're in Wooded Pond, right?
Yes.
David? I thought I heard you say you're in Wooded Pond. So
Yes,
if you're
sir.
in-
Wooded Pond, right below the proposed development.
Right, so if I understood the engineering, the stormwater runoff, this should improve the Wooded Pond stormwater. Is that correct, Mr. Hirsch, from an engineering point of view? Would this alleviate their current situation somewhat?
The ordinance requires that they reduce the amount of the volume and the rate of runoff off of the property. So the stormwater management facilities will at a minimum not increase any of the runoff to Wooded Pond.
And it might improve it.
It will likely improve it.
Okay, thank you. Is there
This
any
is
more?
Ed Greer. I have a question.
I'm sorry, repeat that.
This is Edward Greer. I have a question. And this
Okay,
is-
yeah, please go ahead.
So this does regard the stormwater. Just to follow up on that. So very often we don't know. I'm also down in Wooded Pond, 2 houses over from the second house over from the Smeltzers. We very often don't know whether stormwater has in fact been mitigated until we have a storm. So are there any covenants or other, riders that would come into effect once all those homes are sold and dedicated and the builder's out of there? If it turns out that that's not true and that the stormwater has not been mitigated, but is instead worse, what do we do?
Well, we're trying to predict the future here, and the only way to do that is with engineering. And so that's why the engineering was conducted. So what I think you're asking is if the engineering that was done does not either improve it or at least not make it work, what's the remedy? Is that your question?
Yes.
Okay, I don't know, Mr. Solicitor, can you answer that question?
Yes, I can, Mr. Chairman. Every applicant in Lower Gwinnett Township is required to sign a stormwater operations and maintenance agreement. Gets recorded with the Recorder of Deeds in Montgomery County. It requires adherence to the township's stormwater management ordinance, and in the event there's a problem later on after the development, it requires the applicant to make any necessary corrections that are deemed appropriate by the township engineer.
Okay, and that survives the sale of the houses to the new residents?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Are there any more questions from the audience?
Sorry, this is Dave Smeltzer again. At the last meeting, we heard something about a reduction of runoff in the 80%. I mean, that number sticks in my head. And I'm just wondering what that means in light of the fact that we've just heard that there's going to be no change in the amount of runoff. It's not going to get worse, is what I heard.
Well, I think what I heard is that it won't get worse than what it is, and it will probably get better. But what's your question?
A month ago, we heard about an 80% reduction in runoff. That figure was used at the meeting.
So that was from the applicant's engineer?
Yeah, that's my recollection. I'm sure he's there, right? I mean, he can say what he really meant by that.
No, he's not here, is he?
Oh, he's not. I'm sorry.
Mr. Hughes, your engineer is not here. Okay, so
We do have condition 11 also in this draft resolution about stormwater management to the satisfaction of the township and the township engineer, and being installed as part of phase 1 of the development, if it's a phase development. So I believe we addressed it properly.
what condition is that in?
Number 11.
Mr. Hirsch, our engineer, could you look or can look at condition on 11 for us?
It's condition 10. It says the applicant shall install stormwater management facilities to the satisfaction of the township and township engineer and construct it as part of the required public improvements for the project and particularly as part of phase 1 of such improvements if the project is phased. So I'll let our solicitor interpret that, but
I think it's number 10 in
It's
the
number 10
order.
on mine.
It's
in the
number
order.
11. Did the numbering change?
it's number 10 on the one that's on the screen there.
Which is the decision in order, not the resolution.
Okay, that's the difference.
Okay, so.
Okay, in any event, though, it's in there and that's what it says.
Right, so if there's a problem, David, our engineers and as you heard our lawyers say, if there's a problem with the runoff, we have a remedy. Their engineer, I think I recall, I think I agree with you that they did say that it would reduce your runoff. Our engineer is saying it will not increase your runoff. And I think that's the standard, but at any rate, we have our solicitor and our engineer making sure they'll comply.
So now that I have a question, if we're talking about reduces versus increase or not increase, what is the standard measure? Meaning, how can we make it what the baseline is right now? And how will we measure if it indeed is reduced or if it has increased? You understand what I'm saying?
I do. And so the applicant provides calculations to our office, which I haven't even been completed yet. That's something that happens during the land
The land
development process.
development, yeah.
And those calculations are in accordance with requirements in the ordinance. We review to make sure that those are true and meet the ordinance intent. The baseline is a model of the property as it is today.
Mhm.
And then the proposed is what the property will be once the houses are there.
Okay. So for a typical resident, any of the individuals in Wooded Pond who have been commenting, for them, if they experience what they feel is increased, maybe it shifted and it still has remained the same, but maybe it shifted or moved some way and is impacting their homes, there might not necessarily be a remedy if it's considered to be baseline. You understand what I'm saying?
I guess I do understand what you're saying, but we need to trust the engineering science and the review process and that the proposed design has been vetted and it is the best approach. And then past that, as Neil talked about, we have the assurances that they'll maintain that in perpetuity.
Okay. Thank you.
No problem.
This is Ed Greer. I'd just like to follow up on that. So does that mean you'll maintain it to the model or you'll maintain it to what actually happens on the ground? Because the model may not be indicative of what actually happens downstream.
So the model determines the improvements and then the improvements are built and the covenant that our solicitor talked about ensures that the improvements remain in place and are maintained properly.
So, for example, if suddenly my basement floods and it's never flooded in 25 years, as long as the berm they built is the right height according to the model, that won't be considered to have been a problem.
That's really a legal question, I think.
Yeah, what we deal with are engineering designs. So the township engineer will approve the engineering design. It then has to be constructed in accordance with the design. And if it doesn't work as designed, then the applicant's going to have to correct it. If it's working as designed, but there's still additional problems associated with it, then it's something the township is going to have to look into in terms of a correction. But one way or another, it's going to be dealt with.
Was that sufficient, Ed?
I understand what was said, but it's not terribly satisfying, I guess.
So what I think I hear you saying is you want to protect yourself from future eventualities that engineering cannot divine.
No, I want to protect myself from future eventualities that engineering was not constructed to mitigate.
But you're assuming that that's going to happen. And if it does happen, then what you just heard from our attorney was that we would proceed to mitigate it. And
Okay.
I don't know of any other way to provide you with the assurances that at the standard or the level I think you're requesting, because we can only do the best we can do and the engineers can only do the best we can do. And I think what you heard was that they are.
Okay, so if it was improperly built to the engineering design, then it's the developer's fault. If it was properly built to the engineering design, but the engineering design was, let us say, did not prove to be up to the task, then the burden falls on the township? Is that what I understood?
But I think I heard our solicitor said that township would address it. So again, I don't know, you're looking for a guarantee that I cannot provide you.
Okay, and what does address it mean?
In my opinion, address it means look at the problem, design a solution, and implement it.
Okay, thank you.
Neil, is that at taxpayer expense?
It might be, but with regard to subdivisions and land developments, we hold financial security for 18 months. So if it occurs during the 18 months, we're going to have the funds available to fix the problem. And also keep in mind, there's a homeowners association that's going to be maintaining the stormwater system here as well. So the homeowners association could also have responsibility.
One more thought, if I may, Dave Smeltzer. My memory is pretty clear on this 80% thing, and I recall it being thrown around a few times at the last meeting. And I wonder if perhaps it's worth someone looking at the minutes to the last meeting to see if it was recorded as I seem to recall it, because it's a big change to go from 80 to neutral, and I'm wondering if that's the impact of some decisions that were made at the last meeting, or if their desire to hold on to the 12 units versus what they might have expected as a lower number from some of the comments at the last meeting. I just think we should look into that a little bit further.
It wouldn't change the outcome, because what we're saying is we're using best engineering and we're using the standards and the ordinances that apply in Lower Gwinnett. So what someone says or didn't say, and I seem to agree with you. I think there was some reference by the builder to that number, but it still wouldn't change the engineering requirements that are in the ordinance.
Well, yeah, I don't disagree with you. I just find it a little bit awkward that the first meeting, there's offering great comfort to the residents downstream, and now that's been taken away. And I'm just not sure what else is going on there.
Well, we wouldn't be able to change or incorporate his comments into our ordinances anyway, because our ordinance are set by a standard and are legally defensible from our engineer and our attorney. And that's the standard we have to use, regardless of what they say, because they could have said anything, right? That's, people do that. They say things that are, when you look at them, it may or may not be, the veracity may not be there. That's why we have standards, and that's what we're using.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
if I may suggest, this is a conditional use. This developer has to go through land development that is number of stages, planning commission, and then comes back to us. The residents have legitimate concerns. I think they should follow the whole process and stay on top of it. But again, this is only conditional use, and let it move on to land development. Have the residents follow the whole process and move on.
And I understand what you're saying, Mr. Brandt, but I think there's one more question. I think I saw a hand up in the back. Could you,
Also would I guess I'm just confirming what you're saying, Gray, and what Mr. Smeltzer and Mrs. Greer have also said. It was a matter of expectations. Not only at the board meeting was that 80% stated by the developer, not the engineer. And the developer did meet with us residents and also went over the plans and talked about that. Stormwater runoff was a big deal amongst all the residents. And explained it's going to be better, it's going to be better. I may recall, I even said, we've heard that before, what is the guarantee? Trust me, it will work, it will work. So that's why the residents are coming in with this expectation that it's going to be better, not just neutral. I understand what you're saying, that, it's out of the ordinance, but I think it's a matter of the board helping us manage those expectations. If that's not true, we can't, he said it right here in front of everybody, so it's like, okay, great. And now it's like, oh, hopefully better. So it's an expectations problem, I guess, or, and the other thing is, Mr. Grant, follow the process. For some reason, sometimes we get communications that the development is being, the neighboring residents get communications that it's going to be either discussed at a meeting or at the board. I know the last time we got something official and we had to say, we want to speak up, we had to give our name and address and this sort of thing. That came to us. I didn't seek it out, so I didn't even know this was on the board schedule. Is there a way of, how come we got that communications one time and then not another? I don't know.
You have to ask the manager that.
I didn't know that was part of the process and something. So in order to know that it's on the agenda at any particular planning meeting or whatever, we just keep checking the agenda?
For the conditional use, you get an official notice in the mail.
Oh,
After that, if you sign up for updates from the township, we'll put the agendas on the website and you'll get an email blast. There's no requirement to send out notices for land development or something. But for zoning hearing board and conditional use, there is a requirement.
you
But they
okay?
can, the residents can follow the agenda planned for the planning commission on the website, and it would show up on there. So
Or
then,
you can get automatic notifications, like the manager said, by going on the website and signing up. It's up on the upper ribbon, and it prompts you to enter your email address, and everything that's pushed out from the township will automatically come to you, including agendas.
You
So
okay?
I urge everybody in the room to do that.
Okay. I have a question.
Please, go ahead.
So Neil, could you please explain what is the consequence of what we're voting on? In other words, what step in this whole process is voting on this conditional use?
This is really
document?
step number one of a lengthy process that's yet to come. The purpose of the conditional use is only to approve a cluster development. It's not to suggest that this is the final design. It's still a design that has to be reviewed by the planning commission, by this board, by the township engineer, by the entire staff. So this is a very preliminary stage in the process. And just to address for a moment the 80% comment, That does appear in the notes of testimony on page 38, which is why I added condition 12 to the decision that says all use and development permitted by this conditional use approval shall be consistent with the testimony and exhibits submitted to the Board of Supervisors at the hearing. That's why I added that condition.
Don't we have an awesome solicitor?
I know the numbers are all,
Okay.
I don't think I have that. I don't think I have that one either.
but it's number 11 on here.
It's number 12 on the one in
last
front of
one.
us. Yeah.
It's there, no matter what number it is. It's there.
So I think the reassurance for the affected people is that this is the first step. And if you want to have an impact on this process, then please follow the process and please be involved in what's going on.
Does that help, Melinda? You good? You good? You good with that answer? Okay. I'm not seeing any more hands. We seeing any more hands online? No?
This is Ed Greer. I'd just like to say thank you, Mr. Solicitor, for item 11 or 12 as it may be. Thank
You're
you.
welcome.
Okay. Can I have a motion for, to approve the conditional use?
So moved.
Can I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion passes. Thank you. Next up is a discussion on the waivers for 776 Johns Lane subdivision. Good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Kristen Pianzio from Hamburg, Rubin, Mullen, Maxwell, and Lupin. I represent the Hughes family. We are here because the Hughes have a pending subdivision application with the township. The Hugheses, who are here with me this evening, as well as our landscape architect, Rachel Bayhue, live and plan to stay at their property at 776 Johns Lane. They've been the owners of this property for 14 years. They've raised their 3 children on the property. And the reason why they bought this 10-acre parcel was not only because they fell in love with the historic resources on it and had the ability to subdivide for their retirement, but they are also in love with the woods and the environmental features that surround the property. On this first slide that you can see here, which is the first tab in the booklet that I handed up, this is an aerial photograph which shows a 6-lot subdivision of the property. It is in the center of this plan. You can see an extended cul-de-sac as an extension of Johns Lane. You can see along the right-hand side, parallel or perpendicular to that cul-de-sac is a stream that traverses the property and then cuts across it across Tennis Avenue. This property has an historic resource overlay. It is in a district that allows for reduced lot sizes to incentivize property owners to keep their historic resource. Instead of tearing down a house and subdividing this property into 48,000 square foot lots, the ordinance by special exception permits 18,000 square foot lots if one saves the historic resource. And with that saving comes a facade easement, which would be recorded against the property so that the structural integrity and the look of the building would remain the same. Hughes and I went to the zoning hearing board and applied for that special exception. We had 6 hearings due to opposition from an adjacent neighbor. That was appealed. We won in front of the zoning hearing board. That was appealed to the Court of Common Pleas and then again appealed to the Commonwealth Court. So it was 3 years in the making just to get the right to subdivide the property as is permitted by special exception. Since then, we took a look at the subdivision itself.
Excuse me, Kristen, can you use the microphone, please? I'm getting comments on.
Okay, thanks. If you could turn to tab 2 in your booklet, which is slide 2. This is a 12-lot subdivision of the property. The Historic Resource Overlay District permits 18,000 square foot lots. If the Hugheses were inclined to take advantage of that 18,000 square foot minimum, they could yield a 12-lot subdivision on this property. They have chosen to do something very differently than that because they care about the environmentally protected areas. The lots, instead of being 18,000, they range from 50-some thousand, 60-some thousand. We have a 99,000 square foot lot, 2.3 acres is proposed for the property on which their house is located, where they wish to stay. The adjacent lot is 1.3 acres, and they did that intentionally to minimize the impact on this property. If you could turn to the 3rd slide, which is tab 3 in your book. The original subdivision that was submitted was a 7-lot plan. You can see how Johns Lane is extended in that same cul-de-sac. There are 2 lots on the right as you come in. There's lot 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. We took a look at this because the environmental features that surround the stream really were impacted by the 7-lot plan to the point where the Hugheses decided voluntarily to drop yet another lot. And if you'll turn to the next tab, what they're proposing is a 6-lot plan. Now, I don't want to underestimate the value of dropping an acre lot in Lower Gwinnett and what that value is. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars to them, but it was more important to them to minimize the impact on this property and keep this property as green and as natural as possible. This plan shows you the level of area that is not touched. In order to develop the property, clearly trees have to come down. Construction needs to be had, but you can see these large swaths of open space of this environmentally sensitive area that we are able to protect with this 6-lot plan. They're able to protect the riparian corridor along the stream, the woods, the wetland, and the floodplain. We're able, with this plan, to keep the historic nature of the property, keep the country look that it has today by not overdeveloping it. And we're also able to reforest. The Hugheses hired an arborist who went out and did an inventory of this property. He put together a report about the property. He had recommendations about how to reforest to make sure that the forest thrives. There are invasive species that are out there today that are injuring the forest, and we now have a game plan to protect it, even with this development. They also hired an historian who put together this historic resource impact report as required by your code. His recommendation was that he was in favor of this development. He thought what was going on here had a minimum impact on the historic resource. In fact, saving it, of course, is quite advantageous. This development has been reviewed by your Building and Zoning Committee meeting a number of times. We did go to your Planning Commission twice. The Planning Commission reviewed the arborist report. They reviewed the historic resource study. They asked us to go out and check the sight lines where this new extension of Johns Lane would intersect with Susquehanna Road and the other Johns Lane, which was done. The engineers met on site and were satisfied. They wanted a list of private roads in Lower Gwinnett that measured 26 feet wide, as we're proposing here, where there's no curbs, sidewalks. And we sent them 16 examples of just random roads that we found in the township. They asked us to verify that we can't have access on Tennis Avenue. I think the neighbors on Johns Lane, and I'm certain that there's a number of them here, take issue with this extension of Johns Lane. If they had their druthers, we would go out to Tennis Avenue and not disturb John's Lane at all, which if that was a path of least resistance, we would absolutely take it. I reached out to Fran Haney when we were in the middle of the zoning hearings, who is the director of District 6 here, and asked him if he would permit a curb cut onto Tennis Avenue. He said absolutely not. PennDOT always recommends that you take access from a road of lower classification. The Planning Commission asked your traffic, I forwarded that email to your traffic engineer, and he had his own conversation with Fran Haney, who confirmed just that. The other reason why it doesn't make good sense for us to go out to Tennis, even if we could, is that you would have to cut through the most environmentally sensitive portion of this property, and nobody wanted to do that either. The fire marshal is okay with a 26-foot wide cartway that we're proposing. We want to keep the same look that you have today on Johns Lane and Susquehanna, and we can do that with a road that matches. He did ask that we restrict parking to one side of the street. We had discussions about that because there will be a homeowners association, and they wanted to be sure that we could guarantee such a restriction, and we agreed to do that. They asked for street lights at the end of the driveways, which we can do, also can guarantee through the homeowners association. And then we're proposing, and the traffic engineer is reviewing how to deal with the intersection of this cul-de-sac extension. We talked about stop signs at the intersection, which will accomplish a couple of things. Number one, it'll create a safe ingress and egress to this proposed extension. And number two, we're hoping it will cut down the cut-through traffic on Johns Lane. We are all aware that notwithstanding the signage that is there saying that you're not allowed to cut through within certain hours, people still do. And I think that aggravates the neighbors on Johns Lane, and I don't doubt that that is aggravating. But if the stop signs are there, maybe it won't be so convenient, because it won't be a cut through with a straight shot anymore. The traffic engineer is doing a study to decide exactly how that stop will go, whether it'll be a three-way or a two-way, and we've agreed to do whatever his recommendation is. Our neighbor, Mrs. Lesko, who is on Johns Lane, right as the straight shot on Susquehanna leads right to her property. She has a barn on her property. She came out, she was the one who opposed us in front of the zoning hearing board. She came to the planning commission and expressed some concerns, and the planning commission listened. She was concerned about the historic nature of the street, and by us not widening, curbing, or adding sidewalk on Susquehanna, Tennis, and our interior road will maintain that historic look that she's speaking of. She was concerned about cut-through traffic. Again, I think the stop signs will handle that. Thirdly, she asked about the construction. Obviously, I can't say that for the houses of 4 construction, the construction of 4 houses will go unnoticed. There's no way to avoid that. Yes, it's going to be noisy for a little while, but she asked if we could have access down at the back of lot 1 instead of using the cul-de-sac extension to go through to build the basin and to remove the trees down on the lower end, right where that arrow is, in that area, so that the construction vehicles won't be traversing in front of her house. And the planning commission thought that was a great idea. They asked us if we would agree, and we did. Fourth, the planning commission recognized that the historic resource study asked for some sort of visual buffer from the view of the Lesko property towards our new houses. We said that we would look at it and do that. This plan that you see here is an enhanced landscape plan. We left the planning commission with a recommendation for preliminary approval with all the waivers after extensive discussions in 2 meetings. But after we left, our team huddled up and said, you know what, maybe we can do more with this landscaping. Even though we are asking for a waiver for tree removal, we have no more room to put trees on this property because it's so heavily wooded. We would have to literally take trees down in order to plant them. But we looked at places, little pockets where we could add landscaping to just enhance the lots. And one of the places that we chose was the corner of lot 1, so that as you pull in, and that's that first lot there, well, we could plant that heavily to create a visual screen from the Lesko property onto our property. I have Rachel here. She can discuss more about what she's done on this plan to add additional plantings that are above and beyond what the Planning Commission saw. The Planning Commission's recommendation was unanimous. The Montgomery County Planning Commission also recommends this development. They said it's a designated growth area in the Monco 2040 plan, and they encourage the use of existing infrastructure for new development, which is what we're doing here. I do have the waivers to discuss with you, and I believe all of you have the waiver letter. And if there's no questions at this point, I can either call Rachel and have her talk about what we did with the reforestation and then get into the waivers, if that's okay.
I have a couple of questions.
Sure, Ed.
Just in your presentation, you had mentioned parking on one side of the street. What do you mean by that? When you look at these lots, looks like they have their own private area. What do you mean by parking on one side of the street?
I think they were the fire marshal was concerned about the 100-year party that people would park on both sides of the street, and he couldn't get down the middle with a fire truck. So he asked us to be sure to limit parking on one side. I would point out that we are here for preliminary only. We'll be back for final. So I think we could have conversations with the fire marshal about what he's actually looking for and the extent of that restriction, where it would begin in it.
Okay. Lot 3.
Yes.
You show the lot, but you building a house on it?
No, the Hugheses plan to retain lot 3 for as long as humanly possible. They don't plan on developing that at all. So what they would do is retain lots 3 and 4 and sell the 4 lots, 1, 2, 5, and 6.
Okay. All right.
Okay, Rachel.
Can I ask a question while
Sure.
Rachel's coming up? What is the area in the different color, sort of a lighter green at the bottom?
That's the stormwater management facilities. That's a rain garden. You're talking behind the back of these 2 lots right here on the bottom?
Yes.
Yes,
And you're here for preliminary, not for final.
correct. Just preliminary.
Hi, I'm Rachel Vahey. I'm the landscape architect for the project. As Kristen stated, last time the planning commission saw this plan, we went back and looked at areas that we could put some enhanced landscape in, and that's what this plan shows. Your code requires tree replacements. We're asking for a waiver of some of those replacements. It's an inch per inch basis. When you go and you remove trees, then you have to come back in and replace. And as Kristen stated, we have limited room to provide those replacements. Last time you saw the plan, there were no replacements shown on the plan. There were street trees shown, which were required by your code, detention basin landscape, which is required by the code, and interior lot trees, which are required by the code. So we went in and looked at areas that we could add trees, mostly to add in buffering and privacy for the adjacent neighbors and the future users of the site. As you can see, we added some landscape in between lots 1 and 2. This one, yeah, and we added some landscape in between 1 and 2. We added landscape at the corner that Kristen mentioned. We added some buffering, some evergreens in here, since a lot of our forested area is deciduous. We added some buffering on the lots up here where there's lack of vegetation in between the lots, so we can sort of keep the privacy of this vicinity. This equates to about 64 replacement trees. So, and this also includes, Kristen talked about reforesting, and what we talked about with our arborist who reviewed the site. What's not shown graphically on the plan is it's mentioned in the chart over here, which is our compliance chart, going onto each of these lots and putting in at least 10 trees for each lot, which would, and we would do that in a smaller caliper tree, and we would strategically put these trees within sort of the wooded area to continue the growth and to enhance the canopy, the future canopy of the site. When our arborist reviewed the site, there are some large trees. There's a lot of ash, which, throughout southeastern Pennsylvania, we've had a problem with a lot of these ash are dying back. So a lot of our canopy is disintegrating. So we would put in species that would be resistant to future diseases. And so this plan sort of incorporates all of the required trees, putting in some replacement trees, and also some reforestation plans. And that sort of sums up the enhanced landscape plan, as we're calling this plan.
So just to reiterate, this is work we did after we went to the Planning Commission to show either further effort to try to mitigate the tree removal that comes with the subdivision. I would also like to point out that the 12 lot plan would result in an additional 2,550 caliper inches of tree removal. So that's what we're avoiding. And we think that this is a very low impact. There was concerns about these residents getting in and out of Johns Lane. Remember, these are the people who are going to live there. They're going to know how to get in and out of the street safely, and they know to look left and forward in order to look for that traffic. So although there's cut through traffic, it's not going to be exacerbated by the people who live in this development because they will be mindful of it. So I would like to talk about the waivers, if we can move to that. I brought together a little list of cases regarding waivers that I'm sure your solicitor is familiar with. And although we're asking for waivers relative to, there's some minor stormwater issues that the engineers have agreed on, but mainly it has to do with the tree removal, the tree replacement. You have an ordinance that requires every caliper inch to be replaced for every tree that's over 6 inches. So as you've seen for decades, since I've been working in Lower Gwinnett for 26 years, this tree waiver request is repetitive because it's almost impossible to comply with. And when you have a wooded lot, it really is. So that's one of our waivers. The others have to do with the widening along Tennis, Susquehanna, and the interior, well, the size of the interior bulb, and not adding sidewalks and curb to make it look like a new subdivision. We want to blend in. We want to keep it looking historic. And if you turn to the next tabs in your booklet, I took some shots of the views. This is a view of Tennis looking away from our property towards your street, Mr. Gray. What's the name? Is it Arlene?
Arbor.
Arbor. And you can see the vegetation on the left. The next photograph in this tab is turning around and looking down towards the intersection of Susquehanna. You can see the vegetation here in this photograph on the right. Next photo, please. Again, another shot. This is stepped across the street. So the Hughes property is on the right. You can see the guardrail, which will lead to a bridge, which goes over that stream that I spoke about. And that's, I believe, in your next photograph. So this is a culvert and bridge that if we were to do any improvements, as you can see, Tennis Avenue, widening it would make no sense. There's no widening on either side. It would create a dangerous condition. Sidewalks are across the street if people want to walk, but if we were to put any kind of trail system or sidewalk in here, we would have to build a bridge. And to ask a development of 4 lots to pay for that kind of expense is extraordinary, and it would rip through the most sensitive area of the property. Next photograph, please. So this is at Tennis looking up. Everyone calls this section Johns Lane, but technically it is Susquehanna on this stretch. But to the right is the property of the Hughes. You can see the country look that we have here, this historic look as well. Widening here would do nothing but allow more people to cut through and go faster. And again, it would take down more trees and more vegetation that we don't want to do. Here's another photograph, just walking up a little further to show the density that we have here in vegetation. And finally, a closer shot up at where that arrow is where you would turn right to go into that extension of the cul-de-sac. I think that's the last picture. Is that right, Jamie? Oh, one more. This is a picture looking down the Hughes' driveway. This is where the Johns Lane cul-de-sac would be extended. So the Pennsylvania Municipalities Planning Code permits waivers, actually authorizes supervisors to grant waivers where in their discretion, they do not oppose a scheme of development unreasonably proposed, and likewise they sanction well-planned development. Waivers are proper where additional requirements would offer little or no added benefit. A governing body may have abused its discretion in refusing to grant waivers where the denial is contrary to the recommendations of its experts or officials, and literal enforcement of pseudo requirements will frustrate the efforts of the improvements designed to implement other requirements. So in line with the case law that I just read from the cheat sheet that I handed to your solicitor, we think that the waivers are appropriate under the circumstances. They are contained in Woodrow's review, his letter. There's a waiver letter that I believe the board has. The first waiver has to do with submitting existing features within 200 feet. This is a very common waiver that use an aerial photograph. It is routine in every municipality that I've ever worked in, because to go off-site would require you to trespass on other people's property. And the engineers can provide enough information with this aerial photograph. The second has to do with the width of the street. Our proposed roadway is 26 feet. As I said, the fire marshal does not object, considering the parking prohibition. The third has to do with the grade of the proposed cul-de-sac. Your code limits it to 4%, and we're requesting a 5% grade to better match the existing grade and allow us to blend in without disturbing. Again, to do more would disturb more of the ground, so we're trying to minimize that impact, and that's what that waiver achieves. Next, we have the waiver for the widening, curbing, and sidewalks along Tennis Avenue and Susquehanna Road frontages. Next, number 5.
Could you explain that sidewalks? When I hear sidewalks and looking at this land development, what sidewalks are we talking about?
Along Tennis and Susquehanna, as well as our interior cul-de-sac. There are none there. There are some across the street on Tennis, but along the frontages of Tennis on either side of our property, up Susquehanna and along Johns Lane, there are no sidewalks to connect into.
So you're asking for relief?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
Next is
Excuse
the,
me, before you go on. So the sidewalks are requested by the planning commission, or is that one of our ordinances?
so your ordinances require all streets that are improved or that border development to have widening, curb, and sidewalks. Applicants like us come and put together a waiver list together saying they don't make sense here. It would be a waste of money. It would impede the vegetation, hurt the land. We think it doesn't make sense. Your planning commission agreed with us that they don't make sense here.
Okay.
The tree replacement, as I suggested, we were able to supplement, and we're down to 1,899 caliper inches of tree replacement that we cannot do on this property. We would be glad to discuss a donation to the township so that trees may be planted elsewhere in your parks or anywhere in your community. Next, we'd ask for a deferral for the on-lot landscaping for Lot 3. We're just asking that when and if Lot 3 ever does get sold, like I said, the Hugheses plan on holding on to it, but we want Lot 3 to stand on their own, and they would have to do their own landscaping calculations and plantings. So that's just a deferral. Next, in number 7 talks about trails and sidewalks. Again, some of this is a little repetitive, but that's the same kind of improvements we're trying to avoid from changing the look of this neighborhood and to avoid the impact on the trees and the environmentally sensitive areas. The next, number 8, again, that's sidewalks, repetitive, but this is due for the internal, this is for the internal road that we are proposing. Number 9 is curbing, again, repetitive, but the engineers agree that curbs aren't required either on our interior road or Tennis or Susquehanna. Number 10 is a requirement that your code permits reinforced concrete pipe or HDPE. We are providing HDPE, but your code requires an 18-inch diameter pipe. That's usually used for PennDOT roads or public streets. This is a 12-inch diameter pipe that we're using for the rain gardens, which acts appropriately, and I think your engineer would agree. Number 11 has to do with under drain for the road construction. The field conditions are going to dictate whether or not under drain is necessary to be placed under our proposed extension of the cul-de-sac. So if it's required, we'll put it in relative to those soil conditions. If they find wet soils or strain underground water, that would be necessary. But if they don't find that, the under drain would be unnecessary. So that's the reason for that waiver. And we've eliminated the waiver for 12. We actually comply with that. That is it, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. Boy, that's a lot to digest, but I did have an opportunity to read up on it again. I understand, or at least I think I understand what the requests are. Are there questions from members of the board on the, in this, you're requesting, just so I understand, a preliminary, not final,
Correct.
right?
The planning commission, I asked for both preliminary and final, as I always do, because I try to minimize the impact to my client relative to that expense. But the planning commission said, no, just preliminary now, come back for final. And we took that recommendation, and that's what we're here with tonight.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions from the supervisors?
Can you just expand on the reforestation, which presumes removal of trees, limbs, vines, et cetera, and what kind of impact that has on the overall tree canopy of the area?
I think there's two separate things. Sorry. I think there's two separate things there. You're speaking of reforestation would be adding vegetation, and then there's a maintenance component. And I think the applicant has also done some of his own investigation and research. The arborist did mention that in order to improve the health of the canopy, there's recommendations he made with removing some invasives, removing vines that are on some of the existing trees to kind of boost the future health of the canopy. So it wouldn't necessarily have to do with removals or replacements. It's more of a maintenance type of recommendation that I believe, the applicant is interested in addressing.
And they identified a significant number of, what's the name of the tree that the spotted?
Ash. Oh,
No. That they love.
The
Heaven?
spotted lanternfly is a tree of heaven. Right.
So we're going to get rid of a lot of them.
Right. So that would also mean that would be part of proposed maintenance.
This tree for the spotted lantern.
We'll be removing its host, basically, certain species of tree that they love. There's not an abundance of that on this site, but that combined with the ash, which are deteriorating, it would be, removing those would increase the health of the more desirable native trees that are within that
And
forest.
all the work done, the reforestation and the removal will actually enhance the health of the tree canopy.
Correct.
And we're not really losing the tree line
Right.
ultimately.
Yes.
Okay.
All right, any more questions from the board?
On the waivers, Kristen, are these waivers any different from what you asked the planning commission?
No.
Okay,
In fact, there's one less. We dropped the last one.
great. I think that the owner and the developer, I'm impressed with how they are offering the development of, what's it, 4 lots or,
Yes, 4 instead of 12.
right. I think I like to commend them on that because I saw the full development of it and the impact of John Lane on the full development would be dramatic. I mean, it would change the whole. So I'd like to make a favorable comment about that. And
Thank
then
you.
you're going to take this back to the planning commission.
Yes, we'd have to resubmit a final application that would be reviewed again by all your consultants and then go back to the planning commission with that and with those reviews. and then come back here to this board
Okay,
for final.
all right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I have another question, if that's okay.
Please, go ahead.
The facade easement that our ordinance requires,
Yes.
who ultimately will police that? Will the HOA do architectural review or?
Well,
You
the
know.
township, I believe Neil would have a hand in reviewing the facade easement.
Absolutely.
And the township would have enforcement powers if it wasn't maintained, that there would be penalties built in. I've done a number of these in different municipalities and they're quite strict. So, but Martin and Marnie have been upkeeping these buildings for so long that it's like their passion. So you do have the perfect applicant in front of you for that.
Yeah, I did note in the historic resource impact study that whoever the author was very impressed with the condition of the house.
Yeah, I'm in a very unusual situation. I usually work for developers who would absolutely file that 12 lot plan and raise
Right.
these structures, but these folks really care about that property and those buildings.
I had some questions about.
Please, go
I
ahead.
had some questions about the trees. So there's been a reduction from the 2,203 caliber inches to 1,899. Is that through some of the reforestation that you're talking about with the shrubs and other things that you're looking to plant?
Yes, so that's due to the added stuff that Rachel added since the planning commission. So that chart on the plan calculates that for you.
But they're not actually, so we're not talking about the ones that are in poor shape, or are we talking about the ones that are in poor shape?
No, the ones that are in poor shape are not part of the calculations.
That's what okay, so you're equating shrubs and some other flowering trees with the caliber inches of fully grown trees?
Yes, Lower Gwinnett has done that forever. So many bushes equal a tree, so many kinds of plantings equal a tree. So that's part of that.
I'm just making sure I'm understanding.
Yep, you are.
Okay, so in addition to that, you're asking relief from the full replacement from the quantities that are being torn down, which is the 1,899 caliber inches.
Correct.
So you're asking complete relief for that.
Well, yes, we have no room to plant them on the property. So yes, that's where the waiver comes from.
Okay, so the understanding that that amount of caliber inch of tree is going to be removed from the canopy, setting aside the ones that are in poor shape, setting aside the vines and the fixing up of the property, you're asking for relief completely from the existence of that existing tree canopy. So we're thinking more along the lines of what we see on Limestone Pike and Maple Glen.
No, not at all. And I've been by that and it's shocking. Your canopy will actually be intact. What you see, if you can go back to the plans, the landscape enhancement plan. So the nice thing about the design of this property, we are able to keep all that's in dark green is existing. So all that will remain. You have a complete buffer for all the property owners along the edges, along Tennis Avenue. And then you'll see the enhancements in those dots, so to speak, are all additional plantings that will fill in. That canopy will be, it will actually be in better health. The work that we're going to do to it will improve its existence and its density.
No, I understand that the health of the acreage is, I mean, it's the Hughes' property. So the health and the maintenance of it is their responsibility as it stands right now. If we're talking about, actually dividing it and actually building on it to improve the health, I guess is somewhat relative. What I'm trying to understand is the true amount of tree canopy that exists, the forestation that's there currently right now will completely be gone. I understand the perimeter.
Yeah,
But
what you see in
talking-
light green will have no
We'll have no
trees.
forestation.
Correct.
And you're asking us to waive that completely.
Yes.
Okay.
As I also stated, we have offered. We'd offered to make a donation in kind to replace some of the trees. As applicants have come before me, I've seen much greater waivers of caliper inches, with some simple donations. So we're ready, willing, and able to listen relative to that.
I have a couple of questions. So I see there is a creek on the property and maybe, well, you have a way to address excess water through the rain garden there. Have you looked at the possibility that there is a designated wetland on this property?
Oh, there is, yes. There's wetlands, there's floodplain, all of that land along that stream is very environmentally sensitive. That's why we're staying away from it. That's why we don't want to widen and put improvements in that are unnecessary.
Okay.
Okay. Going to open this up to members of the audience. Are there any questions? Let's go on the left here. Please stand up and state your name, please. Could you come up here to the microphone? Thank you.
My name is Lorette Cuff, 332 Kenilworth Lane. My family moved in here in 2004, and at that time I had a 4-year-old and an 8-year-old. And there were very few elementary school age children, Kenilworth as well as on Johns, and especially Johns. And I greatly support environmental and historical preservation. Two of my concerns are the wildlife. Because we all know that any kind of disruption to that area is going to push wildlife out, especially deer. Deer not only will be a hazard to themselves, but they will be a hazard to cars. We don't need any more accidents, but the biggest thing I am concerned about is within the last couple of years, there has been a dramatic increase in the number of families moving in with young children. And in terms of the stop signs that are at Johns and Kenilworth, the police do the best job they can to monitor that, but I cannot tell you how many people blow through that stop sign. And putting stop signs at that corner where they want to intersect into Johns, if that does the same thing that it does at Kenilworth and Johns, we're going to have a fatality. There are a number of, even when we walk our dogs back and forth, you can see how the cars are squeezing by. I would like to have speed bumps, but this is for another issue, put at Kenilworth and Johns. Because I think it would be a good idea if speed bumps were put just at Kenilworth and Johns, but I think that is another issue, and I know it is. Often they're a pain in the neck because I have driven through many streets with them and I'm like, another speed bump. But you know what? If it saves a life, it's worth it. I see a number of children riding their bicycles down there, walking, families pushing babies in strollers. They often come into Kenilworth, which is lovely to see. And it's nice now that the Wissahickon School District stops at each individual house. Before they just used to stop at designated areas. But I think that that is in support of the number of children that have moved into that area. And yes, and I do applaud them for taking that from a 12 partial development to 4. I hope that's a guarantee, but even those 4 houses are going to have people coming in and visiting back and forth, as well as the fact that I think people will also be disoriented coming down Johns. They may be going in there instead of turning on Susquehanna, which can be a very difficult turn to navigate, especially if you have someone coming the other way and it's dark, or if it happens to be snowing or icy. So there are a number of concerns I have, and I don't even live on Johns. However, I do see that there could be a very negative impact unless all of these issues are kind of addressed before this project begins. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Chad, Did we look at, do a traffic study, or was a traffic study done for Johns Lane? And just so you know, this is our traffic engineer.
Traffic impact study was not done. The number of residential units is below the ordinance threshold, which requires a traffic impact study. However, we are conducting the study that was referenced earlier into potentially creating an all-way stop condition at what I'll call the bend, where the Johns Lane extension would tie in and create a three-way intersection. We're near completing the warrant analysis for that. The state vehicle code requires certain warrants to be met. So we've been going through that evaluation, and we're going to be completing that soon and discussing it with Chief Kenny on what the best stop control treatment is for that new three-way intersection that would be created.
Okay, thank you. Does anybody have any questions for the engineer?
I do. Chad, the Johns Lane is a notorious cut through because people come from Susquehanna down from Abington, they come up and they don't want to hit that light at Tennis and Bethlehem. I happen to know the individual that put up that illegal sign saying you can't drive through there at a certain time years and years ago, and it's still there, and I'm happy it's there. But there is a major concern about the number of cars that cut through there, and Kenilworth, the people on a daily basis just blow through there. And this lady has a legitimate concern. You being a traffic engineer and seeing this in other municipalities, do you have any suggestions for us for Johns Lane on cut through? Because it happens in other parts of the township. I used to live on Merle Road, and there's this illegal stop sign also, and maybe this one's illegal also, because you have to have the same amount of traffic, as I understand, but townships put up. Any suggestions you have? Because this is, that cut through is major.
Yeah, I mean, there's a number of what's referred to as traffic calming measures that we could evaluate for the entire length of Johns Lane. There's some measures that can be implemented to hopefully reduce the amount of cut through traffic. At the end of the day,
How could you do that?
excuse me?
How could you cut through people that want to cut through? I mean, you say how to reduce the cut through traffic?
To reduce the amount of cut through traffic, we could look at different measures. The speed humps were mentioned.
Right.
The multi-way stop is going to add travel time
Right.
now to Johns Lane. Hopefully that would have some kind of effect. Speed humps is an example. There's other measures similar to putting in a multi-way stop. There's certain conditions that PennDOT requires to be met on a public roadway before you install traffic calming measures like speed humps.
Okay.
So we could evaluate all those different type of things to see what may or may not be effective. At the end of the day, it's always going to come back to, even if you put speed humps on Johns Lane, is that still going to add enough travel time to discourage people from using that as a cut
Yeah,
through?
any recommendations you have? Could you get them to the planning commission and
Sure.
to the staff? That's all. Thank you. And that three-way stop sign at the top, sounds interesting to me, because, but then it's enforceability. If they're running through Kenilworth, why would they not run through that?
Well, and that's one of the reasons why we want to collaborate with Chief Kenny on this. So we set up something that is the most effective, is observed. Is there ever going to be 100% compliance? No. that we
Yep.
want to come up with a strategy that we feel. will
Having
be
talked to police
the best.
chiefs before,
Mhm.
and, he has a manpower situation
Sure.
about the whole township. So, all right. I just wanted to voice my questions to you.
Sure.
Any recommendations, get them to us.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jay. I'll come back to you, Melinda. Over here in the end, please, could you come up? Good evening. And could you use the microphone, Mark? Thank you.
Yeah, hi, I'm Mark Farrar. I live on Tennis Avenue, right across from this proposed development. And I've been, this is my 24th year there. And this area is extreme, and I appreciate the considerations, the green considerations here. This area, as anyone can attest to, is an extremely old area. The homes, my home's 120 years old. I'm sure, the homes all in that area, there are probably, other homes that are just as old. The point I'm making is with this development, there comes a time when things do have to be updated. And you saw on the images, Arrowhead, the development on, on Tennis Avenue, Arrowhead, and you notice that they put curbing in, they put inlets in, and it works because it needed to be updated. So in this instance as well, that area, if you call PennDOT for the past 24 years, this is a notorious flooding area. This area of Tennis Avenue, and like I said, you could call yourselves and they will go down a list of how many times they've been out. Considerations about what needs to be fixed, what needs to be fixed, what needs to be fixed, what needs to be updated to stop this flooding. My concern is you remove all these trees, you're not going to plant any more trees. And I do see a rain garden. I don't know if the rain garden's sufficient. I don't know the depth of the rain garden. I don't know if it's supposed to stay wet, if it's just water loving plants or plants that are going to try to hold moisture, but trees hold, hundreds of trees hold a lot more moisture than, a little swale, for example. So I see an inlet. So my house is directly across from the area where the woods are going to be cut down. So, and I see
Whereabouts, sir?
So I'm, you see that I believe that's a gray inlet.
Huh? I was just
Yeah.
going to ask you.
Yeah, so it's down at the bottom of the screen.
So
You see that break? Yeah,
Right.
so
You live in Upper Dublin side.
I do. That's my property right there.
Okay.
So that inlet, I believe it's an inlet. I would like clarification of what that's going to look like. That's what I would be staring at. That area from that inlet down to that bridge where that culvert is notorious for flooding. That road floods. I could bring back 20 years of videos of that being flooded. And I understand that it does look natural and I love the way it looks, but now it's being updated. It's not going to look like an 1800 farmhouse anymore. It's going to look like a new development. It's going to be a modern development. And maybe it should, as much as I wouldn't like to see all that section of Tennis Avenue look like Arrowhead, where they put curbing in, they widened it, they put inlets, and it works. That section of the road does not flood. The only area that floods is from that inlet down to that culvert. So I understand the waivers and I understand, everything made complete sense, with what was proposed, but like I said, there's some details there. That all slopes towards Tennis Avenue. It's not very apparent. The topography is not very apparent, but that entire lot slopes towards Tennis Avenue. So during heavy rain, all that rain comes right onto Tennis Avenue there. So I know this is preliminary. I mean, there's just needs to be a lot of care. Reducing drainage pipes from 18 to 12, is that the best thing to do? Is that rain garden sufficient? And, should updating, curbing and updating around that development, the new development, should that be considered? Is that something that could alleviate, the dangerous flooding of that road. Would this exacerbate that dangerous flooding is basically my question.
Good. Thank you, Mark.
So today, there's no stormwater management, and the Hugheses take all the water from up above, and it traverses their property through that culvert, and sheet flows towards Tennis. The rain garden will actually capture some of that water. It will absolutely handle the water from the proposed impervious coverage that we are suggesting. Your engineer has reviewed these plans. He agrees that that works, that engineering works, and that will not exacerbate the problem. It will probably make what happens on Tennis Avenue even better. But they've been reviewed and approved, and we're meeting all of your guidelines for stormwater management.
Thank you.
Mhm.
So Mark, I'm going to answer your question in a little bit unusual way, right? So I'm very familiar with that intersection. I'm very familiar with the flooding there. I live on Arbor Lane. So I was pretty upset when I heard that they're going to take out all these trees, because I look out the front window of my house in my den and I look at all those beautiful trees every day. And I look at the deer and the fox and the birds and all of it, and occasionally a snake, but occasionally they're there. And it was pretty upsetting. But I'm also very familiar with the water runoff problem. Right, so I am the co-chair of the Wissahickon effort, Clean Water Partnership, that has the entire basin of the Wissahickon from where it starts all the way down to and including Philadelphia. And there's a huge flooding problem. And the EPA and DEP are coming after all of us in the basin, Wissahickon Basin, with requirements to fix the impairments, and the impairments are really caused in our by the studies we finance for Temple. They're really caused by the flash flooding, and it's scouring the sides of the basins and the stream, and it's causing havoc everywhere. And one of the problems really is that detention basin on Arbor Lane. That detention basin was built like all the other basins were built. And I had our engineer a couple of years ago use something called LiDAR to find all the hidden basins in all of Lower Gwinnett, because they have to be fixed. And they have to be fixed. And by that, I mean, they were all designed to get the water in and get the water out as fast as possible. I never quite understood what the purpose of the basin was, if that was the goal, but that was the goal. So in a stream-wide, Wissahickon-wide way, we're going to address all of those. And there's almost 200 projects that are in front that we submitted to the EPA, starting with the biggest ones, working our way down. But until all of that is fixed, and all of that water coming out of Merle Hills going into a 12-inch pipe that comes under Arbor Lane, dumps into the detention basin on Arbor Lane, which is a privately owned basin, and then immediately goes out and floods Tennis Avenue and all the downstream people there, because you're draining a huge area. Now, if we can get that fixed, and I think we can, it should solve a lot of this, or improve it, right? So we're not looking to keep it the same. We're looking to make it better by a lot if we can. And this is one of those basins, right? So I think, Jim, when you last looked, we were over 100 basins in Lower Gwinnett Township, many of which were built and people don't even know they're there, or they planted them with sod and ruined the ability of the naturalization to work, which is another problem. But at any rate, so I don't know that anything that they're doing on this property would make it worse, because of all the water coming off of Merle Hills into the basin. It goes around their property. And of course, the water coming from 309, believe it or not, dumps into there too. The state of Pennsylvania apparently doesn't think it has a requirement to manage their own water, but my understanding is they do, they just don't appear to do it. But all of that. So I don't know that it'll make it worse. It might make it better, but it's really not part of this discussion in the sense that, is it a requirement to make that process or that flow better? I really, and when that, just so you know, one more thing about this, the water that's coming off of Merle Hills, when that pipe got put in, in the back of the road, I think it's Arlene there. Yeah, yeah, in the back, that pipe diverted a lot of that water that was just going through that property and just had no stormwater management at all. And so it was worse. And of course, we're getting more rain now. And people can argue about global warming and so forth, but the fact of the matter is that the northeast part of this country gets more rain than it ever got. So 100 years rains are now happening every 5 years or so. And that's a big problem. And we just saw that problem with a hurricane that came through a short time ago. So yes, I think it's going to get better. And no, they're not going to make it better, but I don't think they're going to make it worse. That's kind of like a long answer. But that's the best one I have here. All right, sir. I hope that's okay for an answer. Melinda, you have your hand up. Could you come up, Melinda? So I want to make sure everybody hears you. Hi.
So it's starting to sound like our development behind, Cedar Hill development in terms of the question about the rain garden. Oh, I'm sorry, Melinda Wolf, I'm in Wooded Pond. And we have a new development going behind us. And this has some similar issues. Our rain gardens in the development, Cedar Hill Road development, is an open space. Are these rain gardens on the private property? Spanning across 3 private properties? Okay, and adjacent, so are they, whatever, then you'll have to figure out who takes care of it. But what's adjacent to L6? I don't think it's Lasco's, because I see a dotted. 777. Does somebody live on there that? Oh, there's a house back there. So there's a road goes, oh. Yeah, okay. And so that's not part of, they're not affected by any of this. Although it looks like the road kind of cuts through their corner of their property there. Okay, the bottom corner. Got it. Okay, the rain garden was of interest to me. And I think these other people. Thank you.
Thank you, Melinda. All the way in the back there, could you come up, please?
Members of the board, good evening. Is it coming through okay?
Yeah, it is.
It sounds different up here than it does in the back. That's why.
It's always different on stage.
It
right?
is. It is. My name is Michael Lyon. I'm an attorney, and I have the pleasure of representing Joanne Lesko, who's standing next to me. Ms. Lesko will address you in a second. I don't believe she's had the opportunity to address the board about this plan at this point, but just by way of introduction, she lives, and I can try to point it out. She lives at 765 Johns Lane, which is right at the corner, literally right at the corner where Johns turns into Susquehanna, and will serve, if this plan eventually goes forward, as the entrance point for this new cul-de-sac. Ms. Lesko will tell you about her history in opposition to this project, but before she does, I don't want to belabor the point and talk about what other people have already said, but I think Ms. Duckett, you seized upon an important aspect of this, which is the removal of 1,900 approximately caliper inches of trees. You're not, and I understand Ms. Pianzio's point, that they're doing their best to maintain the environmental aspect and the character of the property, but you're talking about a massive removal of trees that will unquestionably, and I think the map speaks for itself, change the character of the neighborhood. If I can also add, and I'm pleased to see that there were additions to the map made in terms of a visual barrier between lot 1 and Ms. Lesko's property. But I think the map points out pretty clearly, there's a substantial number of trees there now. There's substantial vegetation there now, and it's going to be replaced by, I won't give the exact number, but it's certainly not as many as what was there before. And in terms of the traffic issue, and I want to just bring to the board's attention quickly, the traffic issue was brought before the planning commission as well. And there were some concerns, as I recall, noted among members of the planning commission and requests for a traffic study. It sounds that remains underway, and I understand we're only here for preliminary approval at this point, but it may not be required based on the number of residents in the neighborhood, but I think you've heard sufficient notice tonight and words from the neighbors that a traffic study would be extraordinarily beneficial before this plan goes forward. So I'd urge you to take that into consideration and have a finalized traffic study before this happens. Without further ado, I'll turn it over to Ms. Lesko, who I think can address the board with some of her thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you, Mike. Good evening. My name is
Good evening.
Joanne Lesko, as you know, and I reside at 765 Johns Lane, which is pictured appropriately on our map above us. I purchased this residence 25 years ago as a historical enthusiast, and I certainly do appreciate all of the historical nature of Lower Gwinnett and the concerns people have for keeping and holding on to such treasures, as I look at my home as a true treasure. As you know, my home is registered in the Lower Gwinnett Historic Properties. The home was built in 1850 and the barn was built in 1851. We have spent an inordinate amount of money, as many people have as well, to enhance their treasures. But we brought as many of you know that have lived here for so long, we took up the stucco and brought it down to the original fieldstone. And the barn itself was in a little bit of state of problems when I purchased the property. So we did extensive work on that and brought it back to where it is today. We're currently undertaking some major projects right now, painting and renovating the house and the barn as well. To the surprise and dismay of many, I have stayed with this project for several years. And yes, I did go to courts past the zoning hearing board. Interestingly about this experience is no court has ever said our points were invalid, but rather they were just too premature. They all said our concerns, such as historical ordinance, the traffic safety, ingresses, egresses, saldo, drainage, trees, etc., would all be handled by the Planning Commission and the Board of Supervisors. So I chose to stay on course and continue to protect my historic property, almost as you would a child. And this unique and beautiful neighborhood as well. And assuming that the township governing bodies would look out in good faith for all of the above issues I mentioned. But on days when you watch the school buses stopping at each house to pick up and drop off children, you watch traffic going the wrong direction during the restricted hours. You watch cars completely ignoring the Kenilworth stop sign. To have accidents that involved our property by people missing the bend, to almost have been T-boned by a vehicle, totally unaware as our car is coming to the bend, which as a local resident, you do learn to slow down and look. Which was very, very concerning to be almost, we may not be here today. And it was a car that was coming down John's, completely never saw the bend and just flew into the driveway there that goes into the homes in the Hughes property. So the resolve from the last meeting was a possible three-way stop at the bend. Well, that means my driveway would be in the middle, probably in the middle of that three-way stop sign. And to look at the adherence that people have today of any regard to signs, stop signs, whatever on John's Lane, I truly question the three-way stop sign and the value as it stands without any type of a traffic study. I appreciate moving the construction entrance as was described tonight. And the reason I appreciate it so much is, as you may not realize, but my barn literally sits 33 feet from the current driveway, which is the property line of that, the driveway and, or the Hughes property and my property. So to have the construction site where it was, entrance, egress and ingress there would have done extensive damage to the property. Let's see. And it was clearly stated also at the last meeting that a buffer would be given, or they recommended a buffer as part of this approval process. And I appreciated that very much. And looking at this, it looks as if there is some enhanced greenery to the lower end, but where I'm kind of struggling and surprised is the neighboring property has, well, it looks like 6 trees as buffers to avoid the view, but I don't see anything there. So in front of mine. So I guess I'm just a little confused as to how much is down at the bottom in that corner property as well. And I don't want to ever allude to the fact I disagree with this development. I think everyone has the right to subdivide their properties for financial gains, but I do believe in the respect and the equality for other township homeowners and taxpayers that will be impacted so heavily by such a development. I thank you for your attention tonight.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mike. Are there any more questions from the board? Yes, please. Hi, come on up.
Good evening.
Yep,
Good
you-
evening.
There you go.
Yeah. Several of my questions have been answered already, so it may, I'm sorry, my name is Diane Morgan. I live at 753 Johns Lane. My house is right next door to Joanne's house. You can see it right up there. My name is Diane Morgan. My husband David and I live at 753 Johns Lane. We have attended all of the zoning board hearings and one of the 2 planning commission meetings, because one of them was on Zoom and we couldn't log in. I found it very surprising that with just 2 zoning board hearings that we're here tonight. I would like to start by saying that Martin and Marnie Hughes have the right to develop their property as it is very large. However, they and Lower Gwinnett Township have a responsibility to develop it in a way that historical ordinances are recognized, as in the case of Joanne Lesko's barn. That safety comes first when we speak of the residents and the children who live on Johns Lane. I don't know if you know, but we have 20 children on the block that are under 8 years old. And we have at least 10 more who are young drivers. And I don't have to tell you about young drivers. I want them to address what could happen when 700 trees are removed from the property and not replaced. And that they respect any new flood maps if they come out, and address the Rose Valley Creek that runs along their property, because we all know what happens in a storm or a tornado, as the water will run downhill onto Tennis Avenue, Johns Lane, and Aileen Road. Okay. I'd like at this time to discuss the waivers. I've been spending some time on them, and I find them to be very extensive. And I know that Ms. Ponzio, I believe. Pianzio has discussed them, but I'd like to go over them again so that I understand them. I can only comment on what I understand. There are several sections to absolve the developer from installing sidewalks, curbing along the streets. And there's also a development of a 26-foot cartway. Honestly, I don't know what a cartway is because it's not going to be a public street. So I'll go on and then you can explain. Will the residents have to place their trash cans on John's Lane, or will this be a public street? In the McMahon report, it speaks about a cartway not having to meet the standards of a public road. I would like to know if that's usual in a subdivision. They also want to be absolved from building any links, any trail links to the development to Arbor Lane. As we and many other people on our street are walkers, we have to traverse onto Tennis Avenue or Bethlehem Pike to walk around the area. It's very dangerous. A trail would be a benefit to us. There are waivers not to be required to replace the trees that will be removed and I'm being absolved from several $100,000, I would assume. I've heard you, Mr. Gray. I've heard you speak about the EPA and the DEP requirements on the Wissahickon Creek. What about the Rose Valley Creek? They must have requirements as well. What about the importance of the trees that help during flash floods and help reduce our carbon footprint? The money that obviously isn't going to be put back on the property, maybe that could be spent improving other areas of Lower Gwynedd. Will trees be removed from lot 3 and 4, even though it's not being developed at this time? Why would anybody need to remove trees from lots that aren't being developed? Maybe that could help a bit. The rain garden, as you call it, currently appears to be on a private property of lots 2 and 3. I don't know what a rain garden is. I have heard of a retention basin. I'd like to know how deep it is. Is it adequately sized after 700 trees are removed? How will we know? What if it floods after this and it wasn't big enough? What do we do then? Is there money kept aside to help us out? I don't know. Does that mean that homeowners on these lots are responsible for the rain garden? Who's responsible for it? Or is the rain garden, as Melinda said, on open space? We don't know. What about stormwater management while the development is being put together before all of that is done? What happens then? What about waivers from providing under drains, whatever that is, along all proposed streets, or waivers from providing 2 feet of freeboard, whatever that is, of all spillways? That doesn't sound good. I'd like to know what that is. Does that help with flooding? If so, I want it. The McMahon report at number 11 discusses a transportation impact fee of $2,285 on new weekday afternoon peak hour trips calculated for 4 houses at $11,425. It's for 4 lots and will generate, they think, 5 new weekday afternoon peak hour trips. Is there a requested waiver for that? Or do they pay for that? That seems to be an acknowledgement of the increased traffic. But we should also talk about the increased danger to all the children. You have a picture that Ms. Pianzio actually has. Not that one, but the one where Joanne's property comes out and the street comes together, where it goes like this, and then there's another driveway. Keep going down. One more. Nope. Nope. I think it's one more. There, right there. That's what I'm worried about, right there. That is the narrowest part of John's Lane. At some point, and we've had school buses and cars try to negotiate that. We have 2 children living at the house next door to the Hughes, and they are in grade school, and they come out to the bus, and the bus stops right there. That's not safe. That's not safe. Honestly, it's a terrible place to start a development. It's something that was never reconsidered. I understand that you can't come out on Tennis Avenue, but maybe there would have been a better spot to start this development. Also, at the very end, what I'd like to do is talk about what are the responsibilities of the HOA? It says they're responsible for maintaining the cartway, the rain garden, whatever spillways are. Are they responsible for caring for the buffer plantings? Or what happens if they die? Those buffer plantings, Joanne won't even have the benefit of that. What about lighting? And what about trails? Thank you.
Okay. Ms. Bianzi.
Ms. Morgan got the waivers correct, but for the free board, we withdrew that one. Your engineer reviews the stormwater management and is satisfied that we're doing what your code requires. The Hugheses plan on taking down no trees on lots 3 and 4 unless they need to in order to protect in the woods from an invasive species. Taking down trees costs a lot of money. So taking trees down unnecessarily on land where they're trying to protect trees makes no sense. The homeowners association will be responsible for the road as well as the stormwater management facilities. We did not ask for a waiver of your traffic impact fee. In fact, we plan on paying it. We comply with your lighting requirements. And as Neil said earlier in the meeting, the township holds a maintenance bond in the amount of, that's determined by the township for 18 months to guarantee all the plantings so that should anything die, it would be replaced. I think I've covered everything.
Okay.
Just for clarity, Ms. Piazza, can you describe, or can you define the cartway? Just so that everybody understands what the cartway is.
Cartway is the road. That's the road width.
That's the roadway in the development, right?
Yes,
And that's not a dedicated road, is that correct?
right. Our section would be private and maintained by the homeowners association. John's Lane is actually 20 feet wide. That's its cartway width. We're proposing 26. We have been talking to the township about narrowing it more if we can, but that's something we could come back to at final. It's at 26 at this point.
Thank you. Are there any more questions from the audience?
That means the township doesn't have to snowplow, correct?
They have to maintain it. We don't have to do anything to it.
We're not school buses. They do that.
Regarding school buses for 5 or 4 lots, I have a feeling they're going to have to come to the edge of the street. So the bus would probably stop just the way it does now with its flashers so that the traffic stops. We'll figure that out. I don't think we've thought about trash yet.
You can't have 14 trash cans lined up on John's Lane.
We don't have 14 houses, so relative to trash, we'll work out with the township or the sanitation department as to how the trash will be removed, and we'll comply with any requirements that they have.
The trash, just so we're clear, right? So in almost all the HOAs, homeowners association that I'm aware of, they have to maintain their own trash. They have to contract separately. They don't use the township's trash contract, if that's your question. So if you know, there's, they would, I'm assuming, right, they're going to have to go into that cartway and pick up their trash. Now, how they're going to get in and turn around, I don't know what the details are. But, you know, the trash in an HOA is contracted separately, at least for all the HOAs I'm aware of. But you did make a point there, and I want to make sure we're all on the same page. And actually, I could have a question here for Chad. So I have stopped behind those school buses more than once because, yes, I use your lane as a cut through because I live right there, right? That's the way I go in and that's the way I go out. And I have been stopped behind school buses more than once. And I know my children used to ride those buses, and thank God the last one moved out. But, you know, that's the way that works. So we all have the child thing. And I thought about making this street wider. Why couldn't they make John's Lane wider? Then it occurred to me about 12 years ago, when I first started my tenure here, we had a terrible accident in Lower Gwinnett. A young man was killed. He's a baseball player in my son's league. And it was a very wide road that he was struck on. And the problem with the wide road was everybody thinks it's wide enough to speed. So then we decided, well, we'll make it narrower, because that's the traffic engineer back 12 years ago, or whatever date that was, said that's the way to reduce it. It's called traffic calming. And Chad, I think that was before your time. And then we talked about speed bumps. They said, that's the answer. And of course, PennDOT has regulations on everything. And they said to us, you can put speed bumps in, but you have couple of requirements. One, you have to get the homeowner whose bumps will be right in front of their house, and they're going to hear the thud all day long forever. And then the other requirement was neighbors in the area had to agree to it because they would be impacted. And guess what? The neighbors all said no. And the homeowner said no. They didn't want to hear the thump, and they didn't want to be the ones that slowed down either. So there were a lot of really, really upset people, but those are the rules, and we can't change them. They're given to us. So we had to comply with it. And at the end of the day, unfortunately, we couldn't do anything with the road. That's what it really came down to. And so our police chief at the time, Chief Shelley, you know, he had extra patrols there. I don't know that we had a speed wagon back then. Maybe we did. And maybe we could have done something there. And but we have speed signs now and police patrol, and we can do all of that. But John's, if you made that street wider and the buses could get down and cars can get around them, that wouldn't be a good thing. That would be a bad thing. And you know, John's Lane is the kind of, you know, when people come up Susquehanna and they see John's Lane and they see that sign, you know, don't enter except for certain hours. They accept it. I pay attention to it. I know I accept it, and I go straight instead of cutting through. But there's not a good answer for that, because unless those children are going to come off that road that currently live there, that bus has still got to block that whole intersection at that bend where that's actually Susquehanna and John's Lane. That's where one ends and the other one starts. Not all John's Lane right there. It starts and ends, but the bus has got to stop. It's the only way to do it. So,
Mr. Chairman, I just had a question, and it's for Chad. So I know that you said that John's Lane is below the threshold of our ordinance that requires an actual traffic study. Can you tell me by what amount?
It's actually based on the size of the development, whether the applicant's required to complete a traffic impact study, which for residential developments, I believe the threshold is 15 units.
So in order to, okay.
But like I mentioned earlier, we are doing the study of the intersection where their access will tie in to determine what the most appropriate traffic control is for that intersection in terms of safety.
So I'm assuming because we have the restricted access during certain periods of time, there was a study of Johns Lane at some point, or Susquehanna and Johns Lane at some point. Do you know when that was?
That predates me, I think, by about 20 years or so. So we can certainly work with staff to dig in the archives to see.
I don't believe there was.
Okay.
No,
So I guess Mr. Brandt's telling me that that didn't happen.
no,
Okay,
to my knowledge.
all right. I mean, I don't know. So that's why I'm asking. I guess my question for
We knew
you,
we had a problem,
yeah,
and so that's how the sign developed.
yeah.
There was a safety problem, and there still is.
I guess my question is, as a traffic engineer, you think that we're doing our due diligence to ensure that there's all safety measures are being addressed as far as Susquehanna and Johns Lane? Would you recommend at any point a traffic impact study?
I don't think a traffic impact study is necessary in this instance, just based on the size of the development. I think we're doing our due diligence on what the most appropriate traffic control will be for this new intersection, three-way intersection that will be created. If the township would like to do a separate traffic calming study of Johns Lane to determine what other measures can be implemented and along its entire length, not just along the applicant's property frontage, that's something you can certainly entertain and complete. As the chairman stated, when it comes to traffic calming measures, there are trade-offs. Some communities like certain ones, some don't. The speed hump example you gave was a good one. In general, those have diminished in popularity over time because of the noise issue, but some communities may feel that's okay. But that would be part of the study process to review the different options with the neighbors, that if things are warranted, what they feel would be most appropriate.
So just to be clear, separate from the potential traffic calming measures that you're doing a study on, do you think that there's any benefit for us to have baseline data as far as what the traffic is currently to ensure that if you do implement any traffic calming measures, or when the development does take place, we haven't significantly increased or somehow know what we need to mitigate?
We are looking at traffic volumes as part of the
You are.
all-way stop study.
Okay,
So we are looking into traffic volumes along Johns Lane. We have to look at crash data
Mhm.
as well. There's a number of factors that we have to evaluate for the warrants that's dictated by the vehicle code. So we are looking at a number of factors.
so that's currently happening?
Yes,
And when will that potentially be concluded?
should be done within the next few weeks, if not sooner.
By the end of November, beginning of December?
End of November, we should be able to have it done, a draft form to review with Chief Kenny.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
the applicants in front of us were preliminary, it's not final. We've heard some extensive discussion this evening. I think the fact that this developer is, and the concerns of the neighbors are absolutely legitimate. But you have a developer that's gone from 12 lots to 4. And again, it's preliminary. I think this discussion and questions have to continue going forward. And I think we should, I'd like to make a motion that we offer preliminary approval and let this move on further to the rest of the administration and the other boards. And we've had an excellent discussion tonight and heard a lot of pros and cons. But I think there's issues that have to be addressed as we go and get more further answers. So I'm putting that in a form of a motion that we give preliminary approval this evening.
Well, just to clarify,
Sure.
we're actually just supposed to be reviewing the waivers. It's just a presentation of the waivers tonight.
Your agenda lists a review of the waivers. I wrote a letter this afternoon requesting an amendment to your agenda so that preliminary approval could be considered just as you proposed, Mr. Brandt.
Okay, that's what I thought.
There's a new amendment to the code which requires the supervisors to vote on a change of the agenda. As your solicitor, I'm sure would advise you, if you were willing to consider preliminary approval tonight, I would ask that you vote to change the agenda to include that as a separate item and then consider the preliminary approval, please.
I would also point out to the board, there's no resolution
Yeah, we don't have a
that's been prepared.
All right,
So we don't have the current
all right.
resolution. I didn't get, I'm sorry, I just want to say to the township manager, was that distributed to us? Because I don't have it.
distributed to me, so I don't know, I don't have.
I didn't get that. That's why I was just asking for clarification.
Well, we got to do a couple of things here. So first off, we would have to change the agenda, and to change the agenda, we have to vote to change the agenda. Is that correct?
That's correct. You would have to state the reason for changing the agenda and then vote on it.
Right, okay. And so we don't have a resolution to vote on. Is that what I'm hearing, Craig? I'm sorry, say again.
No, we do not have a resolution prepared.
All right.
I'm mistaken.
Okay, so we can't even vote on this.
Well, it could. But I don't think it's your normal course to vote without a resolution. But preliminary plan approval could be granted with the waivers upon a vote by the majority of the board. Any other issues can be resolved between preliminary.
So you're saying we could vote on it, is what you're saying?
I would defer to your solicitor, but with an amendment to the agenda, you could.
I would recommend against it, but you certainly could do it.
Well, if our solicitor is recommending against it, I can't do it. All right, so what we have to do then, well, let me ask you this question. So we have one more meeting this month. Craig, we do have one more meeting, right? So we could have a preliminary and final vote before, at the end of the month. So we would have to have,
We would just be voting on the preliminary. They would have to go back to planning for
Right.
final.
no, we can have preliminary and final in one resolution.
Well, planning commission said no. So
But
planning
we
commission-
have time between now and the end of the month.
Okay, if you're saying, maybe if planning commission has a meeting and they go back for final, yes, in November.
Well, that's just a recommendation. We don't have to abide by that. The planning
Okay.
commission is an advisory committee.
I mean, that's possible, but I'm saying that they would go back to planning for final. And then planning would then come to us because,
Yeah.
but, and whatever.
So Ms. Piangi, can you tell me if you're scheduled to go back to planning this month? Or
Not
no?
at this, no, not at this point.
No. Are you prepared to go back to planning if you had an opportunity to go back?
We would, but not with revised plans.
Say that again?
I don't think your planning commission is meeting in November anyway, right, Ken? They're not meeting in November, right?
That's correct.
Yeah.
So when could we vote on this again?
We vote on preliminary in 2 weeks.
So you'll have a resolution and we can do preliminary in 2 weeks, and then we would do final in December,
Thereafter, yes.
right? And you're prepared to go back to planning then?
I am prepared to go to planning, yes.
All right, then I guess that's the best thing to do then.
And that would be acceptable to us. Thank you.
Yeah, you're okay. So, all right. So we, I'm apologize to the applicants there. It just wasn't meant to be tonight. But I think you've done a great job here tonight. We had some great questions. And it looks like the preliminary is going to be set for the next meeting.
Okay, great. Thank you for your indulgence. I know it's been a long night and you have more to do. So have a great Thanksgiving.
Okay, thank you very
Or
much.
I might see you before Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
Well, okay, you can ask a question. Go ahead, Dave.
I'm David Morgan, 753 John Lane, I'm on that map. You come up to the microphone, say the word. I said, my name is David Morgan. Could you put that map back up there for a second? Is that possible? The one with all that nice greenery in the rainforest and whatever that is? Thank you. Calm down. Okay, so I have always been adamant about the safety problems. And I've always told that. I said, Martin, you could do whatever you want. I'm certainly in favor of you building, but I am concerned with the danger and the safety of Johns Lane and the road that's coming out onto Johns Lane. And I've always mentioned that if you come out onto Tennis, there's no problem. You'd have no problem. But they came to us and they said to us, they gave me Mr. Haney's letter that said that Mr. Haney from PennDOT is against having a cul-de-sac road coming out onto Tennis, just like an Arbor Lane, just like yours is. However, all I want you to do is to, while they plan and they go back to you with approval, what's the possibility of Martin simply dividing the land and asking for subdivision where there's 3 or 4 lots coming out to Tennis Avenue? There are 40 some driveways coming out already onto Tennis Avenue from Bethlehem Pike all the way up to Norristown Road, just regular home driveways. I can't imagine if he were to divide that up where there's 4 lots coming out onto Tennis and 1 coming out onto Johns, there's 5 lots right there that PennDOT would refuse a lot that is now stuck and no way to get out of there other than to come out on the Tennis, that they would refuse that. All I'm asking is that a possibility for someone, whether it be the lawyer or the engineer or someone, to see whether or not an individual lot could come out onto Tennis? That would stop all the problems coming down out to Johns Lane.
David, I've looked at it, listened to our engineer.
Didn't talk to
We asked PennDOT if they could come out on off of for Tennis Avenue. I understand what you're saying, but all that's going to do, in my opinion, is just delay the inevitable. We've walked down the conversation about where the development can come out, and PennDOT was pretty clear. And I can understand why they don't want all those driveways between Johns Lane and Arbor Lane.
Oh, that would be easier.
That would be more devastating to traffic on
They
that
would need a
road.
whole road to come out onto Tennis Avenue, which Mr. Haney and PennDOT refused to have done. But would they refuse an individual lot if there were 3 or 4 lots coming out onto Tennis Avenue? All I'm asking you to do is to ask PennDOT whether or not they would refuse. What? Thank you. They would refuse that. You didn't. All you know is that they would refuse a cul-de-sac community development like yours on Arbor Lane coming out onto Tennis. All I'm asking is, why don't you check with PennDOT to see if they would approve 3 or 4 lots coming out as a driveway onto Tennis Avenue? That's all I'm asking.
Thank you, David.
I just want to point out that that is the most environmentally sensitive portion of the property. We don't want to put driveways or anything in the chunk of land that traverses that stream and goes along Tennis Avenue. So even if PennDOT said yes, we would not want to do that to the property.
Thank you. Okay, next up on the agenda, change request for McMahon. Chad, could you fill us in?
Sure, this is pretty straightforward, I think. Back in July, the board awarded a bid to Armour and Sons to replace a traffic signal mast arm at the intersection of Bethlehem Pike and Penland Pike. It was recently struck by a vehicle and damaged, and we recommended replacement. We recently had a field meeting with PennDOT, and they are requiring us to change the size of the mast arm to be a slightly longer length, which in turn increases the cost of the mast arm. So we've received a quote for the additional cost from Armour and Sons, which is $6,359. So we're recommending approval of this change order in order to move the project forward and get the necessary mast arm ordered, which are taking several months to get in at this point.
Okay, thank you, Chad. Are there any members of the board have any questions?
No, I'd like to make a motion that we approve change.
Okay.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you, Chad. Craig, could you fill us in on the next designation of an agent?
In front of you is a resolution to designate the township manager as the agent to apply for any expenditures that came about to the township due to Hurricane Ida back in September. It's just to allow me to put in for any kind of reimbursement that the township incurred during that hurricane. At this point, we have little to no expenses that we would be putting in for, but we want to be prepared in case something should come up. The application for the reimbursement would be December 7th. So this is just to prepare for that.
Okay, thank you. Can I have a motion to approve the resolution?
So moved.
Have a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Next up is public comments for items that weren't on the agenda. Are there any comments from members of the public?
We did have a hand raised,
Okay,
but he's not on here now, so I don't see it anymore. He's not there.
oh, I thought you said there was somebody coming on. Okay, all right, well, good. Okay, no questions from the public. Report from the manager.
Just the township offices will be closed on Thursday for Veterans Day. However, the Veterans Day committee will be hosting their a brief ceremony at the Veterans Park on Thursday at 11 a.m. And everyone's invited.
Thank you very much. Supervisors' comments, Mr. Brandt.
Just I want to make sure that we do our best to attend the Veterans Day memorial service that is done by two great residents of Lower Gwinnett who put this on every year, and I think we missed last year. Did we? Make it last year?
We had.
All right, well, good, I'm glad, and I'm sorry. But I hope we'll see everybody there on Thursday. That concludes my comments.
Thank you very much, Kath.
I'll just second what Mr. Brandt had to say, and other than that, no comments.
Okay, Tessie.
So I'm not sure about this discussion that we just had about the property being, the waivers with the property. It didn't seem like we gave, even though we had a very long discussion, it didn't seem like we had enough consideration of each of the waivers. So I'm not comfortable with moving forward to approve all of those waivers. Is there some way that we can, when this comes up again, which it will, that there can be some of the waivers approved and not all of them? Is that a way, a path forward for us?
It's an interesting comment. So when I first had the conversation about waivers years and years ago, I was like, what the heck are they and why are we giving them out? I sat with our engineer and I went through waivers. What were the waivers? Why do we give waivers? Why are they needed anyway? And what are they for whatever that project? I can't even remember what the project was at the time. And our engineer was able to satisfy me. So without taking up a lot of time in the meeting as to exactly why we give them what they're needed, what kind of waivers there are, could I suggest that you set up a time with Jim so you can go over them and make sure we have all your questions answered between now and our next meeting?
Yes, but my question still stands.
Yeah, I think that sounds like a question for Neil. Neil, is there an ability for us to agree on some waivers and deny others?
The answer is you haven't taken any action yet on any of the waivers.
I know.
So it'll be up to the board when it comes before you for approval to decide whether or not you want to grant some of the waivers, none of the waivers, or all of the waivers. As a practical matter, if you deny some of the waivers, I would guess that their plan would no longer be compliant and could not receive preliminary approval. Unless Jim tells me I'm wrong, but I think without all of the waivers, they would have a non-compliant plan, and you would have to deny that plan.
So waiving some of the fees for the trees is going to make their plan compliant?
You haven't waived any fees. What you would be doing is waiving place the trees that they're removing.
And I think also the applicant offered to make a donation to the township for any waiver of the value of the trees that they're asking to waive. So there will be, if we waive anything, like say the trees, we can compel them to make a donation to the township to where we think the trees are needed, because that has been done in the past.
Okay, and that would be an acceptable solution, but then how do we negotiate how much that money, that cost is? And does that go into the waiver?
Yeah, I think our staff can give us a recommendation on that.
I see a estimate from Gilmore and Associates for $391,000 and 700 some, which is less than what they have proposed to pay. So does the difference of that go into our tree fund, or, you know, whatever that may be, whatever budget item?
I was asked by the Building and Zoning Committee to prepare the probable cost for what the waivers that they were requesting are. I think that's what you're referring to, $391,000.
Yeah.
It's up to the applicant to offer whatever they wish to in lieu of waivers. I don't get to decide that.
No, but
They
we,
did put forth an offer in an email that was sent, I think over the weekend, from the applicant's attorney. But that just related to tree replacement, I believe.
yeah. So what I'm trying to understand is if we have this estimate, and in one of the items, I'm not so interested in the pedestrian bridge or the asphalt trail, but I'm interested in replacement trees, which is $189,900. Is that your best estimate of what, according to our guidelines, is what it's going to cost to replace the trees they're going to take down?
I think that $300 a tree is a pretty accurate estimate of what it would cost the township to install 3-inch shade trees.
And that's not the first time you used that number for your.
No, we've used that number before, and I also think it's important to understand that a lot of times we use that number as a starting point.
Okay. Well, I guess I'll just take this offline and discuss further. I'm just not comfortable that we really thoroughly discussed each of the waivers before we're getting ready to vote on all of them the next time the interested parties come before us. So I just want to make sure we understand the implications of what we're voting for. Thank you.
Danielle?
So thank everybody for coming out. I want to echo Supervisor Brandt's statements and encouraging everybody to come out Thursday, November 11th at 11 at Veterans Park to help us honor our veterans.
Okay, thank you. I think it's all been said. It's an interesting night for sure, right? So long nights, we've been here for a few hours now. Thank you, everybody, for coming out. Hopefully we'll see you on Veterans Day. Have a good evening.